What's cracking, y'all? You are now watching Boo TV. Appreciate you for stopping in. Like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell, stay notified, and let's get into the topic for today.
With the conclusion of the OKC and Denver series, we have now wrapped up the second round of the NBA playoffs, and they have been great so far. So here we are again, where I was right, where I was wrong. It's been a whole lot of wrong on my behalf. We'll also be checking out the poll results that you guys voted on, and I'll also be putting out my revised predictions based on actual outcomes. So like I said, yes, the second round especially, my predictions have been absolute doo-doo. Doo-doo. I hit with the accuracy of the Boston Celtics from 3. 25%. 1 for 4. The funny thing is, the series that I predicted correctly, the one series I did predict correctly, Oklahoma City in 7, was actually one of the series where I wanted my prediction to be wrong because I was pulling for the Nuggets from a fan perspective. So if you didn't check out my last video, any series with a green check means I predicted the win correctly, but in the wrong amount of games, which means a double check means I called the correct amount of games in the series, and of course a red X means I was wrong. So like I said, I did pick OKC in 7. I thought ultimately Oklahoma City's bench would be too much to overcome in a 7-game span, and the Nuggets may experience some fatigue due to their thin bench. However, I don't think fatigue was really much of an issue with why they lost, as much as it was execution and getting all the players to play well on the same night. Most nights it was either Joker or the team. 2 of the games they lost, they had opportunities to win down the stretch, but to be frank, you can probably say the same about OKC as well. Ultimately, the better team edged out and won. I actually had a feeling that Game 7 would be a blowout, especially after Aaron Gordon's hamstring injury. But anyway, let's see how you all voted on this series. With 30 plus votes, 60% voted in favor Denver Nuggets and 40% for OKC. I'm actually surprised at this. I thought most of the people on the channel that voted would actually sway towards OKC. For the 60% of you that voted Denver Nuggets, I wish you guys were right and I was wrong. That's not a joke. I'm serious. Thanks everybody for voting on that series. I appreciate it. Next up, I picked the Dubs to beat the Timberwolves. Obviously, not much to say here outside of everything that went to shit in Game 1 with Steph Curry's hamstring injury, and the Warriors could not stop the bleeding and hold the fort down to get to a Game 6 with a hopeful Steph Curry return. I did think the Warriors could win at least one game at home based off the strength of Jimmy Butler and a few people rolling with him, but the best shot was in Game 3 and it all fell apart in the fourth quarter. Playoff Jimmy is dead. Bury it. He is not going to his light in the sky anymore. But to the polls. Survey says, with over 30 votes, 55% picked the Warriors and 45% picked the Timberwolves. Not surprised by this one. I do think this was going to go probably 7 games with Steph Curry. And I think it was an interesting matchup, and I think both teams were, on par more or less. This was definitely a tough one to analyze and figure out. So it being damn near 50-50 is understandable. Thanks everyone that voted on that series. I appreciate it. Next series was Cavaliers and Indiana Pacers. I picked the Cavs to beat Indy. This was based off what the Cavs have demonstrated all season long on both ends of the floor with depth as well. I did figure that they were kind of just that regular season team that'd be really good but eventually lose to somebody in the playoffs, but I didn't think the Pacers were good enough to be that team that would eliminate them, and I thought the Boston Celtics would, but we saw how all that played out. Not only did the Cavs have the depth, but they had a perennial all-star in Donovan Mitchell. I'm not as high on Donovan as other people, but he is a perennial all-star. By the way, Donovan missing 3 straight free throws in critical crunch time is jarring. That was all mental. He was getting buckets with threes in that stretch, single-handedly trying to will them to a victory and missed the easiest opportunity. That pressure is different at the free throw line because of expectations, I'll tell you. At the same time, I have to put some respect on the Pacers. I underestimated them going into these playoffs. I did. These guys play like a well-oiled machine, and I believe Pascal Siakam's championship experience is something that's being overlooked, and I overlooked it myself, to be honest. Some people forget this guy has a championship and was a key contributor on those Toronto Raptors. Siakam is a fringe all-star, and Miles Turner played a good series, and Haliburton is playing carefree and comfortable. Even with some of the injuries Cleveland sustained that had some of their players out for a game or two, whatever, part of the Cavs' strength was the next man up mentality, and I think they were still very capable of winning those games and honestly were outplayed by Indy. I think the outcome would have ultimately been the same had Garland suited up in the beginning. To the polls, survey says Cavaliers with a 53% edge compared to the Pacers 47%. I am actually surprised. See, a lot of you didn't underestimate the Pacers at all, obviously. I would have thought that this would have been like, 70-30. But obviously, you guys saw what I couldn't see in the Indiana Pacers or even in the Cleveland Cavaliers for that matter. So, hey, good shit to all you guys that picked Indy. Hell of a pick. To the next series. Boston Celtics versus New York Knicks. And of course, like most of America outside of NYC, I picked the Boston Celtics to crush the New York Knicks. And in fact, I had Beantown repeating as championships. So much for that. To cap off a pretty abysmal series and abysmal performances by the Boston Celtics, they would conclude it all with Jason Tatum tearing his Achilles tendon. Wish him a speedy recovery. What a shit show from the Boston Celtics. I'm not going to go on too long about this series. We all know about what happened in that series. The low basketball IQ demonstrated by the Boston Celtics, chucking up three-point shots and missing them, expecting different results, blowing late game leads, not going out to win the game but trying to survive it, stars looking disinterested for a long period of time, long stretches, showing no life, just going through the motions, and a guy with a mysterious long-term respiratory infection. What the hell? Knicks played harder. They gave a damn, outplayed them down the stretch, and understood the concept of 48 minutes. End of story. And the polls say 70% Boston Celtics, 30% Knicks. See, like I said, a lot of people, most people outside of New York, didn't think the Knicks had a chance, and we had our reasons. But hey, I would be surprised. I want to know, of the 30%, how many of y'all picked the Knicks that aren't actually Knicks fans? Y'all knew it. This is going to be an interesting remainder of the playoffs, considering the remaining teams. Teams lead with the now young stars of the NBA, and one of them will be crowned a champion this year. And you know what's going to happen? The minute they win a championship, whether it's Ant-Man, whether it's Hallie, whether it's Brunson, all we're going to hear about is if this guy is now the face of the NBA. I'm telling you, we're going to hear that immediately after and in the coming weeks into the offseason. This young cat won the championship. He's the face of the NBA. And we'll have to hear it from Molly Kieram's voice. I got a headache already just thinking about it. Shoot me now. I'm so tired of this face of the league debate, if you want to call it that. Now for my revised predictions based on actual outcomes. The Western Conference Finals. This is tough. For context, they split the season series 2-2. Neither of these teams experienced any major shakeups in the roster before the trade deadline this season that may add some story or context and within that whole season matchup. With that being said, Julius Randle was a new acquisition in the offseason and has definitely gotten better as the season has went on. Also, I do take the season series with a grain of salt at the same time, considering how much differently the game is officiated in the postseason versus the regular season, especially this year. And it has exposed a lot of players and a lot of teams, when they're not getting all those foul calls all day and having to deal with a bit more physicality and finding it harder to score. League-wide, there's been a drop-off in efficiency and scoring. These players are getting a taste of what basketball was like in previous eras, and a lot of them can't handle it. And I'm actually happy to see it. So I went back and forth with myself for a long time trying to decide between the Thunder and the Timberwolves. I think this one is a hard one to figure out. Ultimately, I think that I'm going to go with the Minnesota Timberwolves in 7. Yes, not the number 1 seed OKC. I'm going T-Wolves in 7. It's an interesting matchup, and up until this point, the Timberwolves has had a size advantage in their previous series, but now they won't have that size advantage anymore dealing with OKC. And I'm curious to see how Julius Randle is going to perform offensively inside the paint, specifically with OKC's 2 bigs. He's going to be met with length and mobility against Chet, but Randle has the strength. And against Hartenstein, he will be met with length and strength, but Randle has the mobility. It may be more problematic if both bigs are on the floor at the same time to cover for the other bigs' weaknesses and deficiencies. But if there's only one big out and they're matched up with Randle coming full steam in the half court, he has either the strength or the mobility to take advantage of one of the two. But when both bigs are in the paint, Rudy Gobert is going to have to be ready to catch drop-off passes and finish strong, because I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity for him with penetration and bringing those bigs over. I really like what I've seen from all of Minnesota's role players, with the exception of Dante DiVincenzo, and eventually I would expect him to come out of his funk consistently as the playoffs move on. And this series might come down to a series about who's going to produce better. Is it going to be Dante DiVincenzo or Alex Caruso? And Caruso has been money all playoffs long. He is the definition of consistency. Both ends of the floor. He has been. But one big reason I did decide to pick the Minnesota Timberwolves is just because of their mentality and their demeanor. How hungry they appear. They appear to be stomach growling, hungry wolves, and they don't give a damn who the matchup is or who's in their way, especially Julius Randle. I cannot talk about this guy enough and how impressed I've been with him probably over the last 2 months, especially in these damn playoffs, man. Julius Randle has been a monster. He is laser focused right now, and he is spinning on all cylinders. And now he's hitting the 3 ball with consistently and efficiently, and he's been taking smart 3-point attempts. And while he's been making all these damn 3-point shots, he never let it stop him from being who he is and being aggressive, getting into the paint and constantly attacking. And that's the type of balance I like to see. Also, Julius Randle's playmaking hasn't been getting talked about a lot, but it's been absolutely exceptional, making timely, correct passes seemingly all the time. I really like what I've seen from him. I think both teams have enough exceptional wing defenders to cover most switching situations and keep a pretty good defender on the more potent offensive threats at all time. I'm sure SGA, Williams, Randle, and Ant-Man will see all kinds of different looks. I hope we get to see a lot of SGA and Ant-Man actually matched up against each other. one-on-one, let these guys duke it out. It is the Western Conference Finals. What are we doing? But notice I didn't mention much about SGA and Ant-Man because I'm just considering them a wash at this point. They equal each other out. T-Wolves in 7, baby. Timberwolves in 7. Moving over to the Eastern Conference Finals. New York Knicks versus the Pacers. This one takes us all the way back to the 90s, doesn't it? The days of Reggie Miller and Patrick Ewing, baby. Like the Western Conference Finals, I think this one is pretty difficult to figure out. Probably even more so, to be honest with you. I damn near was going to do a coin flip. I believe these teams have only met 3 times in the regular season, with the New York Knicks taking 2. But like I said, scratch that. What I've seen from both of these teams in the postseason, nothing else matters. Anything that happened in the regular season, I take it with a grain of salt. These are 2 teams that I admittedly underestimated from the beginning. Hallie and Brunson both play the same position but play completely different. And I like the contrast, to be honest with you. That's going to be a fun matchup to watch, and I like Halliburton's game because he doesn't need to score to be effective. And from that aspect alone, he kind of reminds me of Jason Kidd a little bit. I actually can't wait to see the Karl-Anthony Towns versus Miles Turner matchup. Both of these guys are stretch bigs, and Turner is not hesitant to shoot that thing either. However, I do like Miles Turner's size and strength inside the paint, and I think Cat will have his work cut out for him. But considering what we know, Cat likes to hang out on the perimeter too much at times, and this should open up the lanes for the New York Knicks and keep less resistance at the rim when the Pacers are in man coverage. I probably expect to see more zone defenses to counteract. Well, there's no question Cat is the better player, but I'm curious to see if Turner attacks him with physicality and to see how Karl-Anthony Towns responds to it if he does. Now, Cat torched the Pacers in the regular season matchups, averaging 30 points and 20 rebounds respectively. But like I said, it's a different game now in the playoffs. I think this series has a lot of interesting matchups across the board. I think they can go many different directions when you think about what players like Pascal Siakam can offer, players like Hart, like Nembhard, like Bridges, and obviously the return of Obi Toppin going against his old team. The list goes on. I believe the New York Knicks clearly have the most talent and the better premier players, but the Pacers' system of getting it done by committee can be extremely lethal and difficult to guard and cross-match. But with all that being said, I'm picking the New York Knicks in 7. But let me make this very clear. I want the Indiana Pacers to win. I want the Pacers to whoop their ass. I have a friend that's a hardcore Pacers fan, and he's been salivating for a championship. He's been a Pacers fan since the 90s, and he told me he would cry if the Pacers won a championship. So I hope they prove me wrong, prove my pick wrong, and beat the New York Knicks. Besides that, folks, the polls are up for these 2 series. I encourage you to go ahead and cast your vote and comment. And after the conference finals, we'll come back here and we'll revisit the results. And thank you everybody that submitted their votes in the previous series. I appreciate you guys for stepping in. Like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell, stay notified. Let me know what you think about it in the comment section, and I'll catch you on the next one. We out, baby.